Why did God consider Uzzah's actions irreverent and David wasn't irreverent? That's what Michal thought about him. She thought he was acting in an embarrassing manner. And Uzzah is just trying to protect the ark because it's holy, probably, right? And so, why would God be mad at him for that? So mad that he would kill him. Maybe we tend to agree with David, as I said before, and we're kind of mad at God. We're like, why would you kill him? And then maybe we agree with Michal and we're like, yeah, you were looking like a fool out there. You should be a little more reserved. You're the king, for goodness sakes. And so, how can we get it so wrong? How can we be so backward from what God thinks? And I think some of it is because we really don't understand reverence and holiness. Like I said, we don't consider the sins against God maybe even as important or serious as the sins against people, whereas they should be much, much more serious. But also, we kind of just look at this like God is, flown into an impulsive fit of rage or something, but that's not the case. God specifically told them, first of all, not to carry the ark like this, and second of all, that if they touched the holy things, they would die. He said that. He said, if you touch any of the holy things, you will die. And so this isn't an impulsive fit of rage on God's part. This is the natural consequences of what he would do, regardless of why Uzzah thinks it's right. It's just like us touching a hot stove. You can say that there's a million reasons why you would possibly do that. But if you touch a hot stove, you're going to get burned every time. And so this is just the natural consequence. Because it's holy, they're not supposed to touch it. And holy literally means like set apart, completely separate from you, because God is great and you are common. Michal thought that David was too great to mingle with the common people, but we're all the common people. God is the one that's holy. He's the one that's separate from us. And we are too common to touch anything that is holy and glorious like the ark was. And sometimes because we just don't think about it, God needs to impose harsh consequences on us so that we will remember, hey, we're supposed to revere him. He is holy. So maybe for us to understand this just a little bit better, think for a minute if we could see God hovering over the mercy seat. If he was the king sitting in the cart being paraded through the streets, would you just casually walk up to him like he's just any common man and just start talking to him? Would you touch the cart that he's being carried on, the king? No. We would approach the king with some trepidation, if at all, right? We would give him the most possible respect as we could. And so, if that's how we would treat an earthly king, then why don't we treat God with even more reverence, right? We know that he should be treated with more reverence. So then you might be thinking, okay, fine. I get it. I understand why this happened to Uzzah. He wasn't supposed to touch the ark. He touched it. Doesn't matter that he thinks that he is doing the right thing. That is something that we all need to realize, is that, Uzzah thought he was doing the right thing, but God had a specific command against it. And so we can't decide in our own minds, oh, I think that this sounds like the right thing for me to do. But God specifically said you can't touch it. And so we can't decide in our minds that we think that this is okay, God would be fine with it, when he specifically told us not to. So, okay, we get that. But then what about David? He wasn't acting with trepidation. He wasn't being reverent, it doesn't look like. He's not solemn and serious. He's dancing around like a fool. And so, why is it that he's not being irreverent? Well, again, let's think about the king being paraded down the street. He's not approaching the king. He's not touching the king. He's standing on the street celebrating the fact that the king is coming to his town. And if you were standing on the sidelines as the king was being paraded through the town, you might throw all caution to the wind and yell out something. You might say, I'm so glad you're here, or you're doing such a great job, or thanks for coming, right? And not think about what everybody else is thinking. You might just be so excited that you don't hold anything back, right? That's all David was doing. He was so excited that he wasn't holding anything back. And so to Mikal, he looked like he was embarrassing himself. He was not being reserved enough and maybe not being reverent enough to God coming into his town. But the king would not think that you were bad if he was being paraded through your town and you were celebrating. He would be glad. And so that's all David was, is just excited. So this whole story was written down as an example for us. It was an example to them then, a warning. Uzzah was a warning, and David was an example. And it's the same thing for us today. God is above us, way too holy for us to approach without a sacrifice, and too glorious for us to even look on with our normal eyes. In Exodus 33, Moses is talking to God and he says, Please show me your glory. And in verse 19, God says, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will be compassionate on whom I will have compassion. But you can't see my face, for any man that sees my face will not live. Here is a place by me, and you shall go, and you shall stand on the cleft of the rock, and my glory will pass by you, but I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand when I pass by. And then I'll take my hand away, and you will see my back, but you can't see my face. That's how glorious God is. And the ark was not supposed to be approached by anyone other than the high priest, only with a sacrifice. It stayed when it wasn't traveling. The ark was supposed to be behind a curtain in the tabernacle in the holiest of holies, or the most holy place. And it's because God's presence was there. And the only way you could approach God is if you had a sacrifice in hand. But for us today, that doesn't mean that God's not approachable or that we should avoid him. We just have to put him in his proper place, not forget who he is and who we are in comparison to him. He is the creator of heaven and earth, and we are the ones he created. He's sinless, and we're sinful. And that sin separates us from him. And the only thing that can bridge that gap is Jesus. It's because of his sacrifice that now we can approach God. Just like those priests could approach God with a sacrifice, we can approach God with Jesus as our sacrifice. Hebrews 4:13-16 says, There's no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are open and laid bare to the eyes of him whom we must answer. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who's passed through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let's hold firmly to our confession. For we do not have a high priest that can't sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things, just as we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace for help at the time of our need. And then in Hebrews 10:19-23 it says, Brothers and sisters, since we have this confidence to enter the holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, which he inaugurated for us through the veil, that is, his flesh. The veil is the curtain that I was telling you about that the ark sat behind. Jesus went through that veil by dying on the cross in his flesh. And since we have such a great high priest over the house of God, let's approach God with a sincere heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed pure with water. We've been sprinkled by the blood of Jesus, and that's how we can enter into God's presence. So he says, hold firm to the confession of your hope without wavering, because the one that promised is faithful. And so, because of this, we don't have to be reserved in our worship or quiet about who God is. Instead, we need to be like David, praising and celebrating God's presence in our lives with reckless abandon, completely unconcerned about what people think about us, and focus completely on what they think about God. If we are excited about God, if we are thankful for all that He's done in our lives, if we are displaying that to other people, you know, that might look foolish to some people, but to others, it's going to bring them to Him. And that's all that matters. It matters that God sees that we're celebrating Him, that we love Him, that we're thankful for Him, that we're praising Him, that we're living a life glorifying to Him. And it matters to Him that we are showing Him to other people, just like the song said, tell all the nations. And so I hope that that gives you a little bit better understanding of what reverence and holiness looks like, and maybe a little more boldness about approaching God, but doing it in the appropriate way, in the way that says, I know who you are. You are way above me. You are holy, but Jesus is my sacrifice, and I'm so thankful that He died for me, and you are my Father, you are my Lord, and I'm so grateful to have you in my life.